Hi guys, welcome to the Me, Myself and Mine podcast. Today's guest is Dr Nilesh Satguru. Nilesh is a certified high performance coach, speaker and medical doctor. He works as a director for the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine and sits on the UK's National Sleep Steering Committee. Through his work, he aims to spread a message of compassion, openness, challenge and growth. In today's podcast, we're going to be discussing the power of human kindness and how it affects and connects us all. I hope you guys enjoy the podcast. Hi Nilesh.
Hi Dan.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. Thanks for having me on. Great to be here.
No, it's great to have you on. And in this podcast, we're going to be talking about the power of kindness. But before we delve a little bit deeper, could you talk to us about your role as a doctor and then what led you into high performance coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking that. So, yeah, I think the story actually probably goes back quite a long way. And forgive me if you've heard this already. I suppose you have. But when I was about 10 years old, I remember coming home from hockey practice. I was living in the Netherlands at the time. And I came into the driveway and there was a car that wasn't usually there. And I remember opening the door and just seeing a doctor standing in front of me, and my dad was in bed and the whole left side of his body was paralyzed. Fast forward around 10 years, and he was driving me home from medical school, and I witnessed him. He lost the ability to speak. So he was having a mini stroke. So he had a stroke and a mini stroke within 10 years. And then actually the following day after the mini stroke, he had a heart attack. All of this sparked quite a few questions. So at medical school, I thought, I want to go and help people in the community. I want to prevent these kinds of illnesses from happening. And that's what led me into becoming a GP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people have their own previous life stories that then develop into that passion to then help others. And obviously having your dad affected by a stroke, I can't imagine how that then made you feel, but I can imagine that then inspired you to then help other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those experiences now, often it's much easier. It was Steve Jobs that said this, actually. It's easier to connect the dots looking backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And now I find myself really fascinated by the brain, by psychology, by behavioral change.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is down to what I witnessed, I think, as a child and growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing somebody recover from a brain problem like a stroke, it was really fascinating to see, the body recover from not being able to move one side to my dad went back to full-time work. He recovered. It's amazing, really. He did a fantastic job. And yeah, so absolutely that inspired me to practice, and that actually inspired me to go on and learn about lifestyle medicine too.
So then, how long has your journey been into the lifestyle medicine?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I qualified. I went to medical school. Let's see if I get the dates right here. I went to medical school in 2006. So it's been 15 years that I've been studying the mind and the body.
Yeah.
5 years of medical school, and then 5 years of training after that to become a general practitioner. So it's 2 years doing hospital jobs as a junior doctor. Then you do your general practice training, which again is split between hospital work and work in a GP surgery. And it's fantastic training. It really is. It's a very rich, diverse background to come from. Work everywhere from A&E to surgical jobs to psychiatry. It was wonderful. And then after that, after becoming a GP, most people go into lifestyle medicine after becoming qualified in another specialty. Not everyone, but most people do. So then you start to perhaps notice some of the skills that you'd been trained in weren't quite helping the people that you hoped. Yeah. And so we hear about this a lot, that medicine's fantastic for acute illness. For the hospital medicine works extremely well in many different scenarios, and it's all about context really, isn't it, Dan? So, but we find for conditions, lifestyle related conditions, heart disease, diabetes, even anxiety, depression, Alzheimer's, lifestyle medicine, which is a specialty that looks to prevent, treat and reverse chronic conditions through lifestyle change, is the way forward.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not merely just putting a plaster over, you know, the symptoms. You get into the root cause of that issue, potentially changing that person's life.
Absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head. I'm interested. I'm curious, as I tend to. I love to ask the host questions too, because just as you said that my experiences shaped how I practice, I imagine the same is true with you, right, Dan?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, getting into sort of health and lifestyle training always began at a young age. You know, I'd watch my dad training in the living room or going out running, and yeah, I think that really did shape my view on physical activity.
Yeah.
And then obviously I just played sport as I was growing up, and I got heavily into, you know, strength training and into the body. And then it wasn't until my own experiences with mental health and OCD and anxiety, which then led me down the path of more of the mind, mental health, and yeah, it's been a journey, but definitely I'm glad that everything has happened how it has, you know, and I'm glad to be incorporating the body and the mind together because, you know, they're so interconnected.
Absolutely, it's so great to see people. I'm a huge advocate of people coming from all different backgrounds, from health and fitness, from pharmacy, from medicine, from art, music, all the different backgrounds, and so we can all share that common message. You hear me often speak about unity. It's something that's really important to me, that's dear to me. I always believe that there's an inherent value in absolutely everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that we can show people that they have this inherent worth and this inherent value, and everyone has a story that somebody will resonate with, and that's going to help some people. I think we're seeing a bit of a revolution at the moment with that. And that is one of the good things about social media, is that people can share their stories. And even if that helps a few people, as we'll talk about today, there's this beautiful ripple effect that goes on. And I think, you know, I'm sure you've had this with your podcast or with blog articles or with talks that you've done. Maybe it's months, weeks later, someone messages you and said, you know, actually I've started doing this and it's really transformed the way I feel.
Yeah. I think I think the power of social media, you know, it gets a lot of criticism, and you know, we can end up comparing ourselves to people, and it can cause anxiety and all sorts. But it can be very powerful if you follow the right people.
Yes.
Those people that inspire you, you know, whether that's to move, whether that's to read, whether that's to blog, or whether that's, you know, to eat healthy.
Yes.
You've got to follow the right people that you inspire to be.
Yes.
And you've almost got to create your own tribe, your own community that you want to look at. But I think it's such a powerful tool when you're using it correctly to influence you on your own path. And then I think that's how we then, not just social media, but I think that can then help us to, you know, find our passion and to move forward. Because when you see other people doing it, you then think, actually, I could do that, you know, and that power of influence that social media has got is a really, you know, it's a fantastic thing.
I absolutely love what you said. I really do. It reminds me of a little story. I'll share a short story with you. So around 18 months ago, I went to this fantastic conference by a friend she's now a friend, but I didn't know her at the time. It's by a doctor called Dr. Lucy Loveday. It's called Movement and the Mind. Yeah. You absolutely should come to this conference that's going to happen. Obviously, it's going to be virtual in June of 2021.
Yeah.
And that exact same thing happened. I saw this GP standing up there who had organized these speakers from all over the country to come and speak. Some people were internationally acclaimed, yoga, from a monk called Gelong Thupten who teaches on Mindvalley. He was there speaking. Just incredible people. And the energy of that day, I was completely bowled over by it. And I watched that and thought, wow, I want to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow, you can call it the universe, you call it synchronicities, whatever you'd like to call it.
Yeah.
I ended up doing a talk, and a colleague basically said, hey, I sit on the board for the University of Southampton's medical school teaching. Why don't you come and speak to us about lifestyle medicine and see if we can add something into the curriculum? And lo and behold, now I'm just finishing with some of the same teachers that I went and saw at Movement in the Mind 18 months ago. Yeah. One of them being Gelong Thupten, who, like I say, is from Mindvalley. Another one being Dr. David Hamilton, who we'll speak about today. Yeah. And that was all cultivated through social media.
Yeah.
I was able to contact these authors and share with them, hey, would you be interested in coming and teach some medical students? And the response was incredible. So it's a really positive thing when you're on there with a clear purpose or you're trying to find your passion. Mm-hmm. I think, if you're unsure, it can be something that can take over.
Yeah.
But it's a tool, isn't it? And it's all about how we use it. You hear people say this time and time again, but it's so true.
It's like everything, you can use too much of it. You need the right balance and you need the right direction. But I think even if you don't sort of know your direction, even just following people that resonate with you and make you feel good is the first place to start anyway. You might not necessarily want to become this or that, but just when you flick on social media, if you have positive messages and things that make you think, oh, that's really nice, it's better than following people that don't make you feel so good or that you're comparing yourself to. So yeah, it's definitely using social media, as with anything, with intention.
That's it. Yeah, intention is the key, and it's about all of us I'm regularly trying to work on how it can be even more intentional, because it's something that the research is quite well rooted. It's very clear that the more intentional you are, the happier you can be, the more successful you can be, the more better life satisfaction is. So yes, intention is very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose it gives you that direction, doesn't it? When you've got an intention for something, it sets you on that path. It's like you wouldn't get in your car and just drive around in circles. You'd have to put the postcode to where it is that you want to go,
That's a great analogy. Dan.
Well, we're going to be talking about kindness, and I noticed you spoke about David Hamilton, and I'm sure that, when you watched him deliver his talk, it was fascinating, and I've watched podcasts with Dr. Chatterjee, and I follow him on social media. It's great stuff. But what would you define kindness as?
Yeah, kindness is the quality of being caring, generous. I think that's sort of the Oxford Dictionary definition, I suppose.
Yeah.
For me, what is kindness? Kindness is an action. Mm-hmm. And I think it's an act of love, which is an act in the service of others, usually without any need for yourself as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's when I feel kindness really goes to a whole nother level. And personally, since I started to read books about kindness and read books on positive psychology, that's the slight tweak from day-to-day kindness that makes it that much even more powerful, is when you can practice kindness without any expectation of anything in return.
Yeah. I think naturally we do that quite a bit, don't we, as humans?
Yes. Yeah. Tell me what you mean.
Like we expect things, whether that's, you're working towards a goal and you expect this in return, or whether you're nice to this person because you expect that. I mean, it can be quite manipulative, really. But I like the way that you put that, that you're being nice and you're being kind, but without that expectation of anything else. I love that.
Hey, I think my view, Dan, has changed a lot since I think I started to read more and more about spirituality, and I thought we could speak a bit about that. I think even 6 months ago, I don't know if I would have been as comfortable to speak about that. I know people can have negative connotation with that word. I'm not religious. It's not a religious term of any form. However, when you have a connection to like a spiritual existence, then you have a little bit more trust in the fact that when you behave in a certain way, that's somewhere along the lines, and you're not attached as to when or where that happens.
Mm-hmm.
That the way when you practice kindness, it's a positive thing for the collective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, because all spirituality, all religions, all spiritual practices, they unite by saying that we are all one.
Yeah.
It's a feeling of oneness, which says that we're all connected.
Yeah.
How we're all connected is through the experience of our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a profound and powerful thing, a powerful realization that no matter who you are, whether you're somebody who's a billionaire, whether you're someone who's, in a refuge and struggling or homeless, every single one of us experiences emotions.
Yeah.
And so when we're kind and we can tap into that feeling that, being kind makes us feel good, of course that's going to make other people feel good. Yeah. And surely that's what we want for everyone.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, everyone is worth happiness. Everyone has that inherent value that they can be happy and can be kind.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that kindness and the acts of kindness is innate within us as human beings, whether spiritual or not?
Yes. So Dr. David, I'm going to be referencing Dr. David Hamilton quite often, actually, because his book, 5 Side Effects of Kindness, is a wonderful piece of work. I recommend everyone goes out and gets it. It's the reason why it's so wonderful is it's rooted in science, but it's written so beautifully and concisely.
Yeah.
Look, I think what's led us to where we are today, we evolved to live in tribes. Mm-hmm. So the Homo sapiens, as it were, they were very special because not only did they learn how to work together, but they learned how to work together as well through the use of language. And language is really just a medium for the communication of our emotions. Okay, so we all have thoughts, we have the feelings related to those thoughts, and then we use words to try and communicate that. And us as Homo sapiens, we were very, very special because of the development of this area of our brain called the prefrontal cortex. And that prefrontal cortex allowed us to be emotional, be logical, be rational, plan, be intentional, all the things that we mentioned. And work together. Because we knew that if we could hunt in tribes, if we could build villages, look after one another, inherently we're better together. So yes, at a genetic level, at an evolutionary level, it's in our DNA, it's what we know. It is part of who we are as humans. It's a humane, the word humane, being kind is a humane act, isn't it? So yes, I fully agree with that. It's rooted in the science. I think our modern environment poses challenges for us to be kind. And I want to say this to anyone who's listening right now, that it's not you. If you're struggling to be kind, it's not you more than likely. It's just a consequence of the environment that you've been in.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be the next question, actually. About, do you think that modern environment and the high stress lifestyles that many of us are leading, suppose challenges to that? What challenges would you say that we face that are taking away those deep-rooted acts of kindness and connectedness between us all?
Yeah. Well, there are many. And part of my work as a GP, in fact, about 80%, maybe more, some studies that show up to even 90% of visits to the general practitioner as a doctor are in some way stress related. And it's really interesting, right? Because what is stress? Stress is when we feel separate from our current experience to our desired experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's when there's an imbalance between perceived demands and perceived ability to cope.
Yeah.
And Dan, of course, the key word there is perceived.
Yeah.
So the environments that we're in now, with workplaces pushing perhaps people to work longer and longer, people spending less time with their families,
Mm-hmm.
things have been automated, which is an amazing thing.
Mm.
So housework doesn't take as long as it used to 100 years ago, which means both people in the household can work. But as a consequence, we've sacrificed that family time, that connection time at home.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, our high stress lifestyle does make it far more common.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, the perception of stress is far more important than the actual stress itself.
Mm.
And there's been a lot of research on this, that actually by just changing our perception of stress and thanking it can have a whole different biological effect on our bodies, can cause us to feel less concerned and stressed about it and more uplifted, in fact, by these things. Just stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. I know we'll talk about that perhaps in a little bit more detail. So I hope that's answered your question. I mean, I think modern environments, although things have got easier, we're working harder and
Yeah.
we've lost time at home.
Yeah.
Time at home is often the easiest place to be kind, you know, first with your loved ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I suppose with the last year,
Yeah.
we haven't really been able to see our friends and family so much. And possibly that's caused a little bit of disconnect.
Yeah, I want to share another story, actually. I spoke about my father right at the start of the podcast, and at the start of the pandemic, I was going through a lot of deep meditation, and I was struggling just like many people. I'd lost 2/3 of my income, and I was thinking, you know, where do I go from here? What can I do to move forward? I had a lot of passion in wanting to go and help people with setting up a coaching business.
Yeah.
And I was looking at loads of different areas of my life. I looked at the relationship with my father and thought that could do with some work. And luckily, I had exposure to these amazing people who recommended, you know, just setting up a regular call with a loved one. And I tried to do that with my father. And I don't know if people have tried to do that before. You kind of call them up, you say, "How are you?" And they go, "Yeah, I'm all right." And it's a bit of a back and forth. There's a bit of a negative energy. And so, but what I remembered is that when I was little, my father it was amazing. He was so great. You know, even when he was tired and he'd come home from a long day of work, he'd always ask me, you know, "What did you learn today?" And he'd encourage me to talk about whatever it is that I'd learned. And he would maybe even test me before tests when I swear I was about 10, 11 years old.
Yeah.
So I started to think, well, I'm learning loads of really cool stuff from listening to podcasts and listening to reading books and whatnot at the moment. So why don't me and my brother and my dad listen to a podcast and then have a podcast club and have a call about it?
Yeah.
It was only once every 2 weeks. Anyway, so my dad lives in the Netherlands still, and my brother lives in Spain. So we're in 3 different countries, all experiencing the pandemic in different ways. But the 3 of us, and my mum, we've done a separate call with my mum, we've all become much closer as a family, literally just through a half an hour call every Monday evening.
Yeah.
On a topic that that's stimulating.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's been really, really amazing. In fact, so much so, in one conversation we've gone to really deep places that we would never have spoken about before. We've spoken about all kinds of things, like, you know, what would happen if after my mum and dad went there, and all of that stuff that we would never have spoken about really had we not set up that call in that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, I suppose that brings it back to what we were speaking about earlier. You've approached that situation with intention. You know, I don't know how you approached that situation with your dad and your brother to say, "Let's watch this podcast," but you did. And the intention of your conversation was to, you know, to speak about that commonality. which then
That's it.
brings
Yeah.
you together and connect.
Yeah, that's a beautiful word. That's exactly right. It's the commonalities, and we all have commonalities. This is what I encourage people to start with, people that you find it easier to have commonalities with. But as you really start to look, you'll see that we truly are all the same.
Mm.
And it's the Dalai Lama that says that. And what he really means by that is that we all experience the same emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So as you start to notice more commonalities and practice more kindness with your loved ones, then you'll start to see that the homeless person on the street, there's commonalities there too.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's reading a magazine that you read, or maybe you can resonate somehow with how that possibly could feel.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that word commonalities is a word that we need more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
When it's easy to create division and say, what's your political viewpoint? Are you a paleo? Are you a vegan?
Yeah.
Are you somebody who's into meditation or breath work? No, let's stick with the commonalities. What do we agree on?
How does that make you feel? Yeah. I think I've been thinking this for quite some time. I feel like our society is so stuck in the ego and what I know. It's more, I know this. Or what do they know? What knowledge have you got? Rather than what do you feel is right? Do you know what I mean? I feel like we're so stuck in that I'm right. No, I'm right. And we don't actually just sit there and think, actually, this feels right or that doesn't feel right. We don't trust our emotions.
Yeah, and I think the science hasn't fully caught up with that yet, but it is catching up fast.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who's, I'm not a researcher in that I don't do studies in the universities and whatnot, but I do like to read some of the research. And anyone who does that will understand that things move so fast. So just because we can't prove something now doesn't mean that it's not true.
Yeah.
And the more and more we're seeing this, that ancient practices, ancient wisdom, there's now science is starting to uncover the truth in that ancient wisdom. Everything from nasal breathing to meditation, the amount of scientific studies on these things are huge. So yes, I absolutely agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can all afford to cultivate more compassion and kindness. It's free. The effects are huge.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it's definitely something that we need now more than ever.
And 100%. And talking about compassion and kindness, I know that you've said stuff about the inner critic and self-judgment and judgment of others that we hold, and these self-limiting beliefs. How do we start to work on those in order to be more compassionate and kind?
Yes, let's start with the self-limiting beliefs. So first of all, it's really important to understand what is a belief.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a belief is something that you hold to be unequivocally true.
Mm-hmm.
Like the sun is yellow or the sea is blue.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just think about that for a minute, because it's really, really fascinating to even think about beliefs. So there's a tribe in Africa, and it's called the Himba tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And in this tribe, they don't have a word for the color blue, right? As a consequence, Dan, people in that tribe can't actually identify the color blue.
Yeah.
Isn't that truly fascinating? So there's no evidence for them, because of the language they use, that there's no color blue. In the same way, we hold certain beliefs in our current modern environment to be absolutely true, when really you might go to another country and they may have a completely different set of beliefs.
Yeah.
So, which I don't know if I know travel obviously is difficult now, but when you travel, you start to understand this. You start to understand that people have different customs, different absolute truths, different ways of doing things. And when you start to see that, then you start to question your own beliefs. And that is the first step to resolving any limiting beliefs is first of all question what a limiting belief might be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your limiting belief may be something like, I have to get married, or I have to have a baby before I'm 30, or I have to be in a salaried job to be happy. These are no more true than me saying I'm the queen. You know, you can literally make up these rules, and they're laws that many of us live by. Now, what I'm saying might be uncomfortable for some people, and it certainly was for me the first time I started to hear this.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, it's extremely, extremely liberating. Is when you challenge those beliefs, you're also challenging your inner critic, which leads us on to our next question.
Yeah, yeah.
Because most of the inner critic comes from you complaining or criticizing yourself based on your absolute rules, which, like I said, may be no more true than me saying that I'm the queen.
Yeah, yeah.
So sometimes there's a place for, I don't like the word criticism, it's more for development. There's always a place for development, and other people's criticism can sometimes help you look in the mirror and say, actually, that I do need to be more patient, or I need to learn how to be more compassionate.
Suppose, I mean, sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
I suppose it's the way that it's said, isn't it? You know, there's always a time to support somebody and say, oh, maybe have you looked at it this way? But when we criticize somebody, they then sort of shut down from that, you know. And I suppose if we're doing that to ourselves, that's only going to then cause us to keep criticizing and be in that cycle, isn't it?
Absolutely. So something I often say to people is, I see a lot of people with anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And anxiety is a deficiency of trust. Okay. And I wanted to say that because know that the main reason why you're experiencing anxiety right now, if you are, is because you've lost trust in something, someone, or yourself at some point in the past.
Yeah.
And now you've learned that experience, and as a result of that, you fear any uncomfortable situation.
Mm-hmm.
So you might be fine going about your daily life, but the moment something changes, the moment you get a reminder of that mistrust, maybe it's for you, maybe it's your anxiety is about being late, and you know, you map out the route before, or maybe it's about public speaking or meeting people.
Yeah.
So you have that mistrust and you have that fear of discomfort, and then that moves on to control. So because situations feel uncomfortable, you try and control the situation so that it doesn't feel so uncomfortable. And that's all trying to take away that unpleasant feeling that you're having, that anxiety, that stress.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about limiting beliefs and self-criticism and judgment, if you think about it, all judgment is linked with attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's you needing something to be a certain way.
Yeah.
And that's usually because of, exactly as I've just explained, that mistrust in the past, that fear of discomfort, and that control. And you want things to be a certain way. You're attached onto an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, you then start to maybe criticize yourself, criticize others, or judge the situation.
Yeah.
And back to the point I mentioned a long time ago, if we're all connected by our emotions, and you want to feel good because everyone's deserving of that innate happiness, everyone has that innate value, and you want others to feel good. And if you truly ask yourself, how good does it feel when we speak critically? It doesn't, does it? I mean, there is a place. I'm not saying that we should never ever do it, but there is a place for it. And, you know, I think constructive criticism can be very helpful in a safe space where you've listened to the person, they know that you've connected well. But the truth is, if we truly ask ourselves, how good did that feel? It doesn't feel good, does it?
No. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's, you know, and I think many of us are living our lives with that criticism constantly going around in our heads, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, what are your thoughts about critical voice? I know you've very beautifully shared about your mental health struggles and challenges, which I know many people are suffering with right now. So what have you found to be so helpful in that?
Helpful is, for me, sharing what I'm thinking with my partner, and with my friends. And again, a lot of times you notice that breeds commonality. Like what we spoke about earlier. You're going to get a deeper connection when you find things in common with somebody. But yeah, I do notice my mind likes to criticize quite a lot, and judge myself, judge other people. But it's something that over the last sort of year and a half, I've become very aware of. But I would say, in the last sort of 6 months, although I'm aware of it, it's still happening quite frequently.
Yes.
I may not feel anxious anymore, but I'm just noticing more and more of these judgments, whether that's about the self or about somebody else or about a situation, which I'm so glad that I don't feel anxious about it anymore. Because, I used to suffer terribly with anxiety, with intrusive thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
But, obviously I still get intrusive thoughts, but when these judgments are coming in, and these criticisms, they don't necessarily affect me like they used to, but they are still there. And I'm trying to develop a kinder approach to talking, in a way of talking to myself.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's very tricky, and I'd love to hear your advice on that.
Yeah, it's about self-love, isn't it? I think what's your intention? Let's ask you, Dan. You say you want to practice more self-kindness, but what's the intention behind that?
I suppose you put me on the spot here. No, my intention with kindness, I suppose, is that to end that thought cycle, that constant thought cycle, of you're not good enough, or you're not going to be able to do this, or those negative criticizing thoughts. Oh, you did that wrong, you haven't done enough. And to maybe support myself in a more compassionate way, because compassion leads to growth. So being supportive leads to growth. If somebody was to tell you that this has happened to them, this really bad tragic thing, and you just then spun it all on them, and weren't listening, you weren't supportive, then it's going to be very difficult for that person to grow. So for myself, it's for my own growth.
Yeah, that you've explained. I'm so glad I asked you that question, because you explained that. I'm smiling so much. Compassion leads to growth. It's literally my mantra. It's so true, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that. And the science backs that up. I'll quickly talk about a study. So there's a study from the Wisconsin Madison Center for Healthy Minds, where there's unbelievable amounts of fantastic research that's come out of there from Richie Davison's lab. Mm-hmm. And as they often do in these labs, they basically train people in certain ways. So give them compassion training, or something called cognitive reappraisal, where they're asked to think slightly differently and reappraise their thoughts. And then they put them through MRI scanners and take a look at their brains. And then in this study, they made them play a game as well afterwards to see what the outcome was. So you spoke about compassion for growth, and I always think there's a third step in that. So compassion for growth, so we can contribute.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that really connects with all of us. All of us know, number one, we want to connect with everyone. That's oneness, right? The next thing is you want to grow. And then the third thing is you want to contribute. Yeah. Because when you're living your best life, feeling your best self, you're a better partner, you're a better dad, you're a better, family member, whatever it is that you're aspiring to be. So anyway, in this study, we had 2 weeks of people being trained in either compassion or cognitive reappraisal. They're put through this MRI scanner, and then afterwards they observed a dictator in this fictional game basically take $10 off a victim and only give $1 back.
Yeah.
And the 2 groups of people, the group trained in the compassion group and the other group trained in cognitive reappraisal, were asked, you can donate up to $5 of your own money to the victim if you want to. What did they find? Well, the group who were trained in the compassion training, they gave twice as much money to the person who had experienced that suffering. 2 weeks of compassion training, which is some meditations, where you probably would have been saying the mantras of may you be safe, may you be happy, may you be at peace, and wishing those words on not just yourself, your family members, but others. So we can see that compassion says, empathy says, I feel you, and compassion says, I intend to heal you. I've noticed your suffering, and I'm there to help you alleviate that suffering. So compassion leads to growth, and growth so we can contribute. So how do we approach the critical self? How can we be more compassionate and kind? It first of all must start with showing an awareness of our own suffering. And this is really hard. Now, there'll be some people out there who maybe listen to this right now, maybe actually kind of welling up and feeling really upset. And I say this with all the love and compassion, that's a very positive thing. Because when we can be truly aware of our own suffering, it is that makes us human. Again, a lot of the spiritual texts, Dalai Lama would say that suffering is a ubiquitous part of our human experience. So when you're aware of your suffering, then you can take that next step of wanting to find the meaning of your suffering. Okay, so the judge says, you shouldn't feel that way, Dan. You should be better than this. You shouldn't do that. But the compassionate side of you says, okay, what's happened recently? All right, we're in a pandemic. That's hard. A lot of people are experiencing negative emotions. Maybe you've lost a loved one. Maybe something's happened at work. Compassion looks for context. And since I changed my medical practice to do this, there's not one person where I've had a proper conversation with them where there has not been a clear context for the way they're feeling. And once you've gained the context and you've understood your feelings, then you can start to take action to relieve those feelings. And that's the key bit, because people think, Dan, that, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, and they instantly try and kind of snap themselves out of it. That's not what compassion is. Compassion is understanding that anyone who would experience what you've been through would be feeling the same feelings. And only from that place of understanding of context, then you move into trying to take action to relieve the suffering of yourself or others.
And I suppose that does take time. It's not just a quick process of, I'm aware, I can do this, I can make change, Would you agree that takes, obviously it takes everybody a different period of time, but it can take a substantial amount of time to make these changes?
In some cases, I think we kind of slightly spoke about this on the phone, but forgive me if I'm repeating this. I'll say 2 things to that. I think it's not always just about the time, but it's about how deliberate your practice is within that time period. So again, another study from Stanford University showed that loving kindness meditations, which is what I explained about repeating, going to a state where you close your eyes, you relax your body, and then you repeat, may you be safe, may you be happy, may you be at peace, thinking of yourself. There's various variations on those words, but within 7 minutes on these functional MRI scanners, people have found to show structural and, well, I shouldn't say structural, where active changes in the way your brain activates in response to that meditation. Now, anyone can practice this meditation. 2 years ago, when I started practicing meditating on compassion, I thought, oh God, what are my friends going to think of me? And this leads me on to my second point, right? which is the people that you surround yourself with can be a very positive influence on you practicing more compassion, right? Like right now I'm connected with you. I feel so open to be able to share about spirituality, about compassion and positive emotions.
Yeah.
But like I said, before I knew you a year ago or 6 months ago, I would not have felt open to share those things. But because we've had that social connection, and now I feel like it's very important that we speak about these things more than ever for everyone else. So in summary, you can speed up your compassion training with loving kindness meditations and with surrounding yourself with people who are also practicing compassion.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know it's not love and compassion meditations, but one style of meditation that I've been doing recently is gratitude, and almost focusing. I suppose it is love, because I'm focusing in on my heart and bringing up these positive emotions whilst thinking about somebody in my life or an experience in my life that I'm heavily grateful for, and continually thinking about that, but also focusing on the chest and those feelings in the heart as if that experience was happening. So I can imagine that they probably have quite a similar crossover, maybe.
Yes. Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic practice. Again, Dan, thanks for sharing that. Anyone can do that at home. Anyone can. Every day, the type of meditation I do is a mix of the 6-phase meditation from Vishen Lakhiani and the Silver Ultramind, which is also fantastic.
Yeah.
So every day I go through compassion, then into gratitude, then forgiveness, and then some visualization practices. And it is unbelievable. I shouldn't say that word because it actually is believable, but it's incredible to see the effect that just thinking about compassion and focusing in on the heart, like you say, thinking about forgiveness, thinking about kindness and gratitude, what effect that has. Interestingly enough, there's more and more research being done on how our brain and hearts are connected. And the research isn't 100% clear, but more and more research is coming to light that you can breathe in a way that makes the electricity in your heart coherent with the electricity in your brain. It's really stunning stuff. And again, it's the stuff that you're talking about. Personally, from an anecdotal point of view, since focusing in on heart center and doing more meditations that way, sometimes, if I'm faced with a decision, I can sometimes feel, I get a feeling like, oh, that feels right. That feels like a good thing for me to do. Like right now, this conversation, I could feel it's like a good conversation. It feels good to speak to somebody about such an important topic, like, and especially someone like you, Dan. So I think we can all train that. Some of this stuff to some people may sound woo-woo, but know that the science is catching up very quickly. And like I say, the electricity of our hearts and our brains are starting to synchronize just through these practices. It's a very exciting. I get very excited about this kind of stuff because, like you say, it's free. Anyone can learn it. And it has huge potential. I mean, I've seen people heal in medical practice through these practices so many different ways. Anxiety get better, high blood pressure get better through these kinds of things. Diabetes. So, I didn't want to claim that it was only through these meditations. They were, of course, doing other things, but yeah, it is very promising for the future that the science is catching up.
And it's fantastic. And I mean, I'm not sure whether you're familiar with Joe Dispenza.
Yes.
That I've been watching some of his series on Gaia about meditation and heart and brain coherence. Those, from watching that has then got me into these heart brain coherence meditations and gratitude. And it's that combining of the emotion with the thought that really does make that difference.
Yes, so true. So true. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think the work that some people are doing right now, I think maybe in the future, and we don't know because the future is a mystery, but so the Wisconsin Center for Healthy Minds, which is Richie Davidson's research group,
Mm-hmm.
they're also studying heart and brain coherence.
Yeah.
And that's a, that's a sort of mainstream university organization.
Mm-hmm.
So I love it when the mainstream university organizations are taking inspiration from people who are sitting outside of that, like Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that people listening to this at home, the take home really is to understand that the whole point of everything you do
Mm-hmm.
is to feel good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the more we delay that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
the more we experience that separation and lack.
Yeah.
So you can train yourself to feel good in this moment. Now, I'm not saying that if you're not feeling good, you should be angry at yourself. Remember, we spoke about self-criticism. It doesn't help. Understand the context of your actions.
Yeah.
Understand that everybody suffers. Find commonalities. These are all the words that we spoke about earlier. And when you start to do that, you'll start to realize that you can find solace in, watching a sunset and
Mm-hmm.
just having a nice conversation with somebody and listening to somebody. Those things can give you so much joy and bliss and positivity.
Yeah.
I mean, the other day, I share another story with you. Quite something I quite often hear about with patients. They'll often say, well, look, I'm kind and I'm learning about all this stuff, but my partner's just really not kind.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being really kind to my partner and I'm trying my best to lift them up and make them feel good.
Yeah.
And they're just low and they're flat and it's getting me down.
Mm-hmm.
And I can resonate with this because it is very tricky. When you're working as a doctor, you're hearing people suffering all day.
Yeah.
And the story I would tell is kind of a metaphor for life, as it were. Is, recently, I started to eat some passion fruits a bit more often than I usually would. And I don't know if anyone's been eating passion fruits recently, but I've realized that they're absolutely amazing fruits. They're like the best things ever. And I was sitting there eating it in front of my wife, absolutely, completely present and enjoying the flavors. And I had no intention of asking her to eat passion fruits. I didn't even say anything, but she could see it in my face. I was really enjoying it.
Yeah.
And a few days later, I see her sort of go, oh, looks like he had such a good time with that passion fruit. I'm going to have some too.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I use that metaphor is sometimes we want people to, eat the passion fruit, as it were.
Yeah.
And we ask them, you should be happy by practicing kindness. You should do this as well, like everyone's saying. The best thing you can do is to completely immerse yourself in your own joy.
Yeah.
Your own positive energy, gratitude, love, etc. And people will feel that and they'll just ask you, they'll say, what's your passion? What's your passion fruit? What are you eating? What's going on with you?
Yeah.
And that's when you can share what you've been practicing, when people find out for themselves.
Yeah, I suppose that's real influence. You're not, and I suppose this come back to the ego and everything. When you're trying to dictate to somebody what they should do, or you're pointing the finger.
Mm.
When we was talking about knowledge and rather than what we're feeling. But if you can resonate what you're feeling, people will feel that. And they can then make their own decisions because you have influenced them, but you haven't told them to do anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's really, really nicely put. And I think that influence is a much nicer word as well.
Mm-hmm.
You don't, sometimes without knowing it, we can be, and I would say I've been absolutely guilty of this quite a bit in the past. And it wasn't my intention, but it can come across as controlling.
Mm-hmm.
when you've asked, and it's an attachment, isn't it? Like we said,
yeah.
You've asked somebody, you should feel better by doing this. And often what we're communicating is, I don't feel good when you don't feel good, so I need you to do this.
Yeah.
Now, if you can go to that place where you feel good you know, as often as possible. And even though someone around you doesn't feel good, and look, that takes work. I'm not saying this is easy, but after a while, those people will start to soak up your positive energy, and they'll start to ask you, you know, what are you up to?
Yeah.
And at that stage, they're so open to try whatever it is that, you know, if you think about any area where you've changed, that's probably been the process. It hasn't usually been because somebody has just, without really asking what's going on with you, just told you what to do.
Yeah.
You've probably observed something, felt interested, asked some questions, and that's what's led you into action.
Yeah, because that really resonated with you at that time. Yeah. But for anybody that, you know, does see this as woo-woo, you know, and we was talking about the MRI scanners and the activity in the brain.
Yeah.
You know, and you were speaking about healing.
Yes.
What effects, like within the body biologically, does kindness and compassion have? Not only on the body, but then to human connection. You know, the release of hormones, and you know, is there science to prove that for anyone out there that is still thinking this may be a bit woo-woo?
Yeah, there's a lot of science, and this is why it's so exciting. Well, look, in 1998, Louis Ignarro and his colleagues won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of a molecule called nitric oxide. Okay, that's not nitrous oxide, laughing gas, it's nitric oxide.
Yeah.
And nitric oxide is one of the most powerful vasodilators our body has, which means that it opens up the blood vessels. Of course, you can think of our blood vessels like the pipe work throughout our whole body. So the fact that your blood vessels are nice and open reduces the chance of you having heart attacks, strokes, kidney disease, erectile problems, the whole lot. And of course, it's a hormone that causes the release of this nitric oxide. What's that hormone? Oxytocin. Oxytocin has been famed as the cuddle hormone, the kindness hormone, the love hormone, but it's what's released with connection of emotions, the absorption of that positive energy, all that stuff that we're talking about causes a release of many hormones, oxytocin being one of them, and other ones like endorphins, dopamine, serotonin. You would have heard these neurotransmitters, little chemicals in our brain. So oxytocin will go into blood vessels, it will park in the blood vessels, and it will cause the release of nitric oxide and atrial natriuretic peptide. What do those two things do? They open up the blood vessels, drop your blood pressure as a result. Okay, so how does this all link up? Well, this is fascinating, right? It's a study by Kathleen Light in 2005, and it looked at the way that couples were communicating with one another. And they found that when couples were warm with one another through deep listening, through physical contact, warm emotional contact, when they measured their oxytocin levels and their blood pressure, what did they find? Blood pressure dropped, oxytocin levels boosted. Anyone else still feeling skeptical? You guys will have seen in the movies polygraph detector tests, lie detector tests. What do you see? You see a little thing on someone's finger. What's that? It's measuring hand temperature. It's measuring oxygen saturation, heart rate, breathing rate, blood pressure. Guys, we can tell if someone's lying through changes in their blood pressure, heart rate, and respiratory rate. So anyone who has a question of, do our thoughts, emotions affect our physiology? Absolutely, it's unequivocally true. But what people get lost in is that it's a compound effect over many years that can cause illness, and in the same way, a compound effect over many years that can create a state for healing. Is that helpful? Has that answered it?
Yeah, so it doesn't just happen overnight. You need that compound effect over time to you're not going to think positive thoughts once and become healed of all your ailments.
Yeah, exactly. It's a consistent practice, as with anything. Now, the reason why I use that word compound effect is because it's a magical effect. You know, if you guys know this, anybody who's practiced any skill of any form will understand this. I know your other half's a DJ. I'm sure she'll resonate with this. When you start practicing, it's hard, guys, whatever it is that you're doing. I think I mentioned this to you on the phone. So at the start, you're unconsciously incompetent. You don't know what you don't know. Then you start to become consciously incompetent when you start practicing a new skill. And that doesn't feel good. You think, oh, this is hard. This is hard to be positive. It's hard to learn about compassion and meditation and kindness. But any skill that you progress at, there comes a point where you go, it's hard, but I love a challenge. I'm going to persist in the face of these setbacks. I'm going to take it on more effort and know that this is going to be worth it. And then you move into that phase of consciously competent. You start to become conscious that you're improving your level of skill. And finally, when you practice more and more and more, like the yogis who meditate in a cave for years, they are unconsciously competent, where, you know, they're not even thinking about how to be compassionate and kind because it's a way of life for them. Now, the research concludes that meditation, compassion, kindness, gratitude practices, they can become a character trait within you when you practice it enough. But please know that, like you said, that doesn't happen overnight. And the healing benefits do start to happen way before it becomes, you know, a complete ingrained trait within you. So if you're comparing yourself to other people, go, oh, I wish I could be as kind as them, or as, you know, be good at meditating as them. Know that we're all on our own journeys and we all have different speeds in which we progress at different things.
Absolutely. I suppose, again, it's coming away from that comparison and realizing that we're all on our own journey. And as with life, we're going to have our ups and downs. And sometimes you may be practicing those meditations, those gratitude, you know, the compassion, the kindness, and you still don't feel great, you know. But again, like with everything, there's a process and there's a journey, and we sometimes do have to accept that we aren't always going to be on top form. And that's something that I find very hard to accept. But it's something that I've become very aware of over the last sort of few months, that I am allowed to have my off days, and it wouldn't be right as a human if I didn't.
Yeah, that's so true. And go one step further, what I would recommend is look for the context of it. Always understand that there's a context behind everything. And, you know, sometimes the context can be such a small hidden thing. It could be, I'll try and give an example from one of my clients, one of my coaching clients. One of my coaching clients suffered quite a lot of abuse in the past, witnessed a lot of discourse and arguments, so much so that whenever they would encounter a conflict, which happens to everyone, right? We all have conflicts, no matter how kind and compassionate you are, you all have conflicts. It started to trigger those previous emotions of the things that they witnessed in their past. And this is a really big thing, guys. Most of the time, our emotions are a reflection of the beliefs that we've held in the past because of our perception of our previous environment. Now, there's real power in that statement, because you have the power to change your perception of any environment you've been in. And I would encourage everybody to do that. And that's painful sometimes, but go back into stories that maybe you think, oh, that person was just awful to me. Just go back to that story for a minute and maybe start to question, okay, what happened with them? Maybe they were sick. Maybe they had job troubles, financial troubles. Maybe they're just trying to do their best like everyone else. And see how your perception changes. I'll share one more story. There's a great story in Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's an absolute classic book. Everyone should read it. And in the book, there's 3 kids on a train with their father, and the kids running riots, you know, they're tearing stuff out of people's handbags, they're jumping on the seats, they're making loads of noise, and the lady shouts at the dad, what the hell are you doing? Control your kids. And the father turns to the lady and said, you know, I would do, but they're just coming back from their mother's funeral. So understand that our whole perception can change with, you know, just a small bit of information maybe we didn't know about yet. Approaching things with curiosity
rather than that final judgment that we know what
Yeah,
we burn through. Yeah.
exactly.
And I suppose the more that we can do that, you know, because we've all had experiences with people, and then we hold on to that frustration or we hold on to that judgment. But I suppose the damage is only really being done to ourselves. And the quicker that we can reframe it and maybe think on the kinder side, the more that we're going to have that, I suppose, that oxytocin, those stress chemicals come down, and we're going to get those health benefits. And then I suppose we're also going to feel less attached to that, you know, less attached to that argument that happened 6 months ago, but you still haven't seen them and you're still fuming, you know. But, you know, we end up holding on to those things, but we don't have to, with possible, you know, like you're saying, reframe the situation.
Yes. Yeah, Dan, I completely concur with that. I read something the other day on social media which said holding on to anger is like holding on to a hot piece of coal with the intention to throw it at the person that upset you. But of course, when you hold on to a hot piece of coal, what happens?
Yeah.
You burn yourself. And I know this personally very well, because when I was going through challenges in my career and leaving the workplace, I was frustrated at loads of different people, until I realized that that was really affecting my own happiness. And it comes back to this thing about innate value and innate worth. When you start to meditate, practice kindness, compassion, you start to become aware of your own feelings a lot more. And when you do that, you start to realize it doesn't feel good to be angry.
No.
And if you, like we said, emotions are contagious. We didn't speak much about that, but I'll briefly touch on that. Emotions are contagious. And so if you're not feeling good, that actually can affect some of your loved ones around you. Even if you're not angry at your loved ones, it can affect them. So we speak about the R number of coronavirus, right? We want that to be less than 1. Actually, there's research that shows that the R number of kindness is close to 5. And Dr. David Hamilton did a fantastic post on his Instagram recently about how kindness can spread. And I have absolutely seen this to be true. So I witnessed someone the other day in a restaurant pay for somebody else's food without, it didn't look like they knew each other. But I think what had happened was that the person on the table next to them was talking to the child of this father who was with their son. And what I witnessed is that father pay for these 2 girls' meals. And as I walked out of the restaurant and witnessed this, I saw the staff, I saw the looks on their faces, and they were like completely bowled over with how kind that was. And they also were being, you know, elevated in their emotions and being kind to other people. And I just know that would have had a ripple effect. In fact, me seeing that, I also felt more inclined to be even kinder than what I was usually.
Yeah.
So know that the power of social contagion, the power of our emotions being contagious is huge. And that's why surrounding yourself with people that are practicing kindness and compassion is also a positive idea.
I suppose it's that ripple effect, isn't it? Like you said, you can reach 5 other people. Those 5 people are going to reach another 5 people themselves. And then I suppose it just goes on and on and on. And, you know, why wouldn't you rather spread positive emotions and kindness than hatred and anger and stress? Yeah, definitely. But, you know, this has been a great podcast, and there's been so many things that I'm going to take away from this. You know, it's been so interesting. But, you know, on a final note, are there any tips that you'd suggest to the listeners or anybody viewing this podcast that they can start doing, like small little tweaks to start incorporating kindness or compassion into their daily lives?
Yes. I've done a video on this, and I really encourage everybody to have a look at it. It's called 3 Heartwarming Ways to Protect Your Heart. And it's specifically focusing on the heart protecting benefits, which we spoke about with the nitric oxide and H1 natriuretic peptide of kindness. And the 3 things that you can do, which is part of the video series I do, is we have these intentional actions that everyone can try to start improving the way they feel. Number one is watch inspiration. So there was a study that showed when they compared someone watching an inspiring video compared to even just a comedy video, that mothers were more likely to breastfeed their infants. Now, something, it won't take long with this, but oxytocin is also used in the letting down of breast milk for pregnant, for mothers who've just had their children. So watch inspiration, watch videos that uplift you, make you feel good, and actually that will create that intention for you to go and be kind. The second thing to do, welcome hugs. Right, with the coronavirus pandemic around us, many of us have lost human touch. And if you're living alone, this is really tricky. But even we know self-touch, I know this sounds mad, but actually the research being shown that this helps release delta waves in our brain, which is healing and associated with deep sleep and relaxation. But of course, if you're not by yourself, just hug your loved one for like 5 extra seconds. It's no time at all. I tell you what, when you actually count out that 5 extra seconds, you will feel so much better. We were made to embrace and touch with people, and that again helps boost oxytocin. Okay, so watch inspiration, welcome hugs. And the third thing that I would recommend that people did as well is to practice kindness without expectation. Okay, so do at least one act where you literally do the act and you completely forget about it and you let it go.
Yeah.
And I'll give an example. Let's say if you see a homeless person, but there's a sleeping bag there, but maybe the homeless person isn't there. You could literally write a note just to say, I wish you well. That's it. Just write a note. And you don't even need to write your name. You could leave a sandwich, a coffee, anything out there for that person. And notice how good it feels when you do that.
Yeah. You don't need that confirmation. It's just about you were willing to give. And it doesn't have to be give something, but you were willing to give that act of kindness without expecting and without having that attachment to it.
Yes, so true. I've really enjoyed the conversation as well, Dan. Thank you so much for having me on. And I think it's wonderful that you're putting this stuff out there, where you're putting out the intersection between the mind and the body and how they interact as one. Yeah, thank you so much. I know we'll be in touch. I know I'll speak to you soon.
Of course. And where can people find you?
Yeah, sorry, I should mention that. So you can find me on Instagram at Dr Satguru. That's D for Delta, R for Roger, and Satguru is like SATGURU, like sat down and then a guru, all one word. And like I said, I put out videos every week. I would love you guys to be part of the community. It's very simple. You just need to follow the instructions in the bio of my Instagram, or if you're not on Instagram, you can go to believingrowth.uk. It's literally, as it says, believingrowth.uk, and you can find out more about me there. I look forward to hearing from you. I love, as you can tell, I like to share stories. So I do love to hear people's stories. It really, really helps if someone says they've tried something and it helps, then I can share and hopefully inspire more people to do the same thing.
Yeah, so it's giving you that inspiration to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's all about contributing, like we said.
And I'll attach those links below, in this podcast. So just in case anybody missed that, I'll attach them below. But no, I really appreciate your time and I really appreciate you coming on. It's been fantastic.
Thanks, Dan. Take care.
Thank you, mate. Take care.
All the best.